Imagine turning passion into powerful leadership on and off the field. At FSU, you can earn a 100% online master's or graduate certificate in athletic coaching. Designed by coaches, for coaches, no matter your experience or sport. FSU Center for Athletic Coaching, educating today's coaches to lead tomorrow's athletes.
Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Coach Talk. My name is Tim Baghurst, and today's guest is Benjamin Smith. Benjamin, thanks for joining me. If you wouldn't mind, just share a little bit about your journey, how you got into the role that you currently have, and your life in sports.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Followed your work for a while on coach well-being and development, and appreciate what you're doing. So glad we have the chance to talk about that. So a little bit about me. What I found working in sports and other high performance spaces is that many high performers are living divided life, where they're outwardly successful, inwardly anxious, exhausted, and uncertain. So my work is around helping them build the inner tools so they can perform at their best, but also feel whole again. And that's really been the quest of my life too. And so it's a very personal journey. Going back, I've always been a high achiever in school and in sports, and had a lot of success in the academic space, but in sports, in football, particularly in high school, really struggled with the mental side of the game. And I had the yips as a quarterback. I couldn't complete a pass when people were watching, and really kind of a disempowering feeling and experience. So as a high schooler, started to get a little bit of a taste of sports psychology and kind of what's going on in the mind in those moments. But really went to college to figure out how does my mind work under pressure and what is happening in these moments? And tried a lot of tools around breathing, self-talk, visualization, all that good stuff. But it wasn't really until I heard a few leaders in that space talking about these deeper things of shame, of vulnerability, of values, that it really clicked for me that part of this journey was about something deeper. It's more my experience of what it means to be human. And I think that's the beauty of sports, is this revelation of these human experiences that we all go through. So I figured out this performance anxiety was really pointing me towards deeper questions of who do I want to be and how do I want to show up in big moments. And we talk a lot in the sports world about controlling the controllables. And I think I found that values and character are really the one thing that we have control over in any circumstance. And so that gave me a sense of agency in these performance spaces, and also an understanding of really being present to what is happening in life and in this given moment. So the question that kept kind of coming up for me was, can I be my fullest expression of myself in this given moment? And I think there's two things that are part of that question. There's training our ability to know who we are and what matters to us, and then also training our ability to be fully present, which I think is exciting because those are trainable skills. Those aren't things that we have to leave to chance or we're born with or not. So from that point, kind of pivoted into the sports psych research, but particularly around mindfulness. Ran a big randomized controlled trial with our college athletic department and published that research on both sport performance, but also well-being. And thought I was on the path towards sports psychology, PhD, and that route for grad school. But as I mentioned earlier, those two kind of components of being the fullest expression of myself and being in the present moment, there's another space that's been holding those questions for a while, which is our ancient spiritual and religious traditions. And so I pivoted and went to divinity school and went to Yale to study how people across time have really wrestled with these questions of being a human, being in high performing and demanding environments, and studied contemplative practices to a deeper degree. These practices like mindfulness that get to the depth of our experience. And then while I was there, worked with coaches at a Division I university who didn't really have a lot of support around them and were constantly navigating these very stressful environments. Led some of those practices that I was learning in class and in that space, and then provided some one-on-one care as well. And then post divinity school, moved back to the West Coast where I'm from, and spent the time working at Canyon Ranch, which is a wellness retreat where a lot of high performers across spaces come in the midst of transition and crisis, and found I was supporting people in those moments of big change to really reckon with these questions of their values and what matters most to them. But now I kind of find myself wanting to be in the space of high performance in the moment, but also connecting to these deeper human questions. So I work with high performers in sports, athletes, coaches, and also executives to really build those performance tools from sports psychology on a firm foundation of knowing who they are so they can be at their best, but also feel a sense of wholeness in their life and not lose themselves in the process of excellence. So that's a long story of how I've gotten to where I am now, but interested in your work around well-being and coaches and kind of tending to that inner side that often gets overlooked in the pursuit of better schematics and recruiting and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, I want to get back to maybe some of the solutions to some of the problems that coaches and athletes experience, but it is interesting that you've developed a way to essentially make a career out of this. And I'm curious for others who may be watching or listening that might be interested in, you know what, I didn't realize we could have a career doing this. I didn't realize we could support coaches as a professional. How does that work? How do you find clients? How do you operate a business like this so that it is not maybe an ad hoc thing? I work with this one person, but it's something that can be a career option for people who have this training, who have this experience, and go, I don't know how to take advantage of this. What has your experience been like developing your own business?
Yeah, I think what I've found, part of it is really being connected to what I find to be true for myself and mattering in terms of who I am. And when I get too far away from that into kind of the marketing or the connecting with people to find clients, then I lose really the relational aspect that's core to this work. So I think a lot of it is really looking for where do people need care and support and have those deeper needs, and how can I meet them in a way that's really conducive for what they are struggling with and going through. So building those relationships is really key and central to that work. And I think it changes and evolves over time. And the work that I do isn't for everyone. So I'm not trying to reach all coaches, because many aren't necessarily welcome or open to really going to those depths. So I think figuring out who are those people who want to do that work and have a real commitment to understanding how they work and how who they are shows up in their leadership and their coaching, that helps kind of narrow the people I'm looking to connect with as well.
I'm going to continue this question. You said you don't do much in the way of marketing because it's not your, for want of a better word, style or philosophy. How then do you find clients? Is it word of mouth? Is it that kind of system? Because if you're not finding clients, you don't have a job. So how does that? How do you find clients then?
Yeah, through word of mouth and my network kind of growing that way in a very relational way, not necessarily through posting and that kind of transactional form.
So when you work with somebody, what does it look like? Do you meet with people monthly, weekly? Is it virtual, in person? Is it group? What works best for a coach in your situation or in your experiences?
Yeah, very, very adaptive to whatever their constraints are. But I've found that working, um, at least in conversation around twice a month, really helps to go to those depths and build that traction over time. But they're also extremely busy, so it's
Mhm.
meeting them on their schedule and what works best in that space. Um, and I think off season and times of uh, being, not fully in the grind of a season is where they can really start to get that deeper work done. And then to your point of where and how do we do this, mostly online virtual conversations like this on Zoom, so I can connect with people really across the country.
Do you have some kind of systematic process that you take clients through? Is it a step by step? We're going to work on this and we're going to work on this, which will lead to this. Or do you do some kind of analysis at the beginning to find out maybe their specific needs and then develop a plan based on that? Is it a 6-month thing? Is it a week to week? How does it work for, let's say, me, if I'm interested in working with you? Explain to me the process for how this would look.
Yeah, we really start with like what is the challenge or struggle that you're coming here with, and let's get really clear on what it would look like at the end of our partnership to have kind of worked through that big question that you're starting with, and that can change over time. It doesn't. Sometimes people enter with one question or concern, and it kind of winds into different territory. But then start to get clear on like what is happening in the present moment when you're experiencing that inner challenge. Where does it show up in your body? What are the thoughts that are associated with it? And really starting to build this awareness capacity. And what can happen then is people are like, oh, I don't like that part of myself, or I don't like this experience, and want to push it away, or just kind of reroute their attention. But we kind of stay with it and listen and learn why is your mind and body functioning in this way in this context, and seeing if we can listen for that deeper story, and then we can reconnect with their core values, that sense of meaning and purpose, and that work in itself can be of some depth, and then find a way to integrate who they are, what's made them really successful in their space, with these performance tools and capabilities as well. And so that's the last kind of phase of building the tools around self-talk and goal setting, visualization, that they can use in a given moment to reconnect to that deeper part of themselves and reconnect into the present moment.
In your experience, what would you say is the biggest challenge for today's coaches? What do they struggle with the most?
I think the environment is just really taxing right now. There's so much pressure externally to win and to perform. I mean, that's the biggest one. But there's also this kind of sense of resource scarcity, and at least the college level, and it can be easy to lose oneself in that process too. And I think I've heard a lot of coaches often blame the environment or blame their team for some of these challenges, but I think that blame is often protecting a fear that they won't be good enough or won't be able to perform to those levels. And it's a balance, I think, to hold the expectations, the real requirements to succeed in order to keep their jobs and livelihoods, with the deeper parts of being human in that space, in that environment.
When you say resource scarcity, what do you mean?
I think there's this sense that there's never enough time. There's never enough um, money for recruiting, for uh, paying the best staff they could get. There's uh, this kind of almost like the walls closing in on them experience. And so trying to help reconnect to that agency that can come from living in alignment with their values and choice rather than kind of being at the whims of the environment around them.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because most, I would say, and I'm guessing you would agree that most coaches are not coming to you or are not enrolling in our programs because they're intrinsically motivated. A lot of coaches are very resistant to discussions about who they are or how they operate or what their values are or what it means for them to be a human. What things do you think are most needed in coaching today that would be the most help for the most coaches?
Well, I think so many coaches talk about clearly winning performance is the end goal, right? And many coaches in between know that culture matters significantly in their ability to have a team that pulls together and is greater than the sum of its parts. But I think not as many coaches always recognize that culture isn't just the words you put on the wall or the repeated phrases that you say over and over again, but it really starts with leadership. And your team doesn't know how to lead if they aren't seeing that modeled well. And so that leadership ultimately starts with coaches and the coaching staff. And leadership isn't something that you're either born with or not. It's really a cultivated capacity. And I think you have to be able to lead yourself before you can lead others. And no matter how skilled and competent and years of experience one might have in coaching, there's still unexpected hurdles and mental and emotional challenges that we all just carry through life. And so having support, having folks to talk that through with is really critical to be able to process and understand, how am I showing up in this work as a leader? And then how does that leadership then affect my team's leadership, my team's culture, and then ultimately our ability to win and perform on the field. So I think this reflective capacity, and there's practices people can do on their own. There's practices that are often well facilitated by just having a coach development partner. And I think your research has pointed to this as well, to kind of bounce ideas off of can be helpful, no matter how introspective or kind of thoughtful a coach might be.
Yeah, that was kind of leading into my next question, which is, can you give maybe some practical advice for coaches who either A, can't afford to work with somebody, or B, don't have the time? I would argue you do have the time, because time is invested in what's important to you, but we won't go there.
I love that. Yes.
What are some practical ways that coaches can work toward being in the moment, staying in the present, finding balance in high stress environments? Do you have any suggestions that you can help them walk away with from this conversation to go, okay, I can try that. I can try to do this.
Yeah, I think there's lots of practical tools, and I think many coaches are already aware of them. Breathing techniques, mindfulness.
You say
Journaling,
that,
things like
Benjamin,
that.
but I'm going to push back and say most coaches don't. They don't know. They may have heard of the term mindfulness.
Yeah,
They don't know what it means or how to do it. So can you elaborate? Maybe give some practical tips.
sure. So we can dive in there, but I'd also like to offer another tool that I think is really the simplest and easiest to start with, which is just reconnecting to the spaces where you feel most fully alive. There's so many things in the coach's life that are scheduled and really time dependent. But it's finding those places where we can play, where there's no expectation of the outcome, that I think can help them most clearly and easily reconnect to themselves first. And then there's those other tools that we can talk about as well.
I recently attended a talk, and in the conversation that there was a sports psychologist there, and they were talking about mindfulness and being in the present and et cetera, which I continually go back to almost on a daily basis, because we're so focused on what's next, what do I need to do tomorrow, what's happening next week, that we fail to appreciate I'm healthy, the sun is out, I feel pleasant, this is a place I am right now, and I am content and happy. And I think most of us don't do that very often, me included.
Yeah,
What
totally.
what ways can we help ourselves do that more? Do we need trigger points? Should it be a specific time of the day? What should it be built into our routine? Should we have an app, an alarm? What can we do to help ourselves just stay in the present a little bit more than what most of us do, which is stay in the future or think about what happened in the past or our game yesterday or whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think so. Let me just reiterate everything you said, because I think those are all certainly ways to practice this. There's so many fantastic apps out there. There's a great one that's free from University of Wisconsin called Healthy Minds. Builds some great skills. It can be just those pausing, those little moments of getting outside and feeling the sun on your face, feeling your environment around you, and really being in touch with your senses. That can help us get out of our kind of mental rumination. And it can also be a longer seated practice of taking 15, 20 minutes out of the day and sitting down and just watching the breath come in and out. And when your mind wanders, returning back to the breath, and seeing if we can do that in the most compassionate, non-judgmental way possible, which is its own challenge. But whatever you choose, I think one of the keys to this is really treating it as a practice and as a mental skill that builds over time. So if it really matters to you, just like the schematics or the technical training matters, taking that time to train it and practice it. And you might even keep a log, a meditation journal or a mindfulness journal, and keep track of where your mind goes, what you're noticing in each practice, and watch as that kind of builds and develops over time. So I think of the key being practice, and that there's not necessarily a right way or a particular expectation to have on what that outcome looks like, but being able to track that over time too.
Yeah, two points to add to this from my own experiences. One, I especially on short drives, I try not to listen to anything. No music, no news, just shut it all down. Try to not focus on the driver who's driving ridiculously slowly in front of me, and etc. But just focusing on what's going on in my own mind, rather than having to have it distracted or entertained. And the second one, which is one I learned from some of my research, I used to ride bikes. Well, I still ride a bike, but I used to listen to a podcast while I rode. I was very proud of myself for being very, very time efficient. I'm getting my cardio and I'm learning something. This is awesome. And then I realized or read about how there was a study done in Japan, and they found that the health ramifications of actually being outside, away from all of the learning, the listening, etc., and just experiencing the outside was what lowered all of the health concerns in these people. And I'm not going to try to pronounce the Japanese word for it, but it was termed forest bathing. And that was a big revelation for me of while I'm time efficient, I'm proud of myself for learning while doing cardio. Maybe I need to be appreciating what I'm seeing and hearing and feeling a little bit more than learning this thing that I could maybe learn a little bit later. And so that was a big, big lesson for me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I love the driving without any other stimulus. That's something that I've found, especially on really long drives on the highway, uh, that is really calming and reveals new insights and often creativity that I didn't expect or anticipate going into that practice. And then certainly with the listening to a podcast while you're doing something else or exercising, that's definitely something that I've done before too. And I think the other question that it raises for me, in addition to the benefits of forest bathing and that research, is just what are we optimizing for, and why do we feel like we need to cram more and more into the day? And I think being able to interrogate some of those deeply held questions of I have to do more, I have to be more, um, it can create a little bit more awareness of this broader kind of interest that I find in working with coaches of this sense of scarcity. And what is it like to just be enough? What is it like to have done enough recruiting for the day, to have planned enough on the game plan, and to be able to go home and take time with family? And when and how do you know what is enough? And I think for a lot of coaches and a lot of athletes, they've never really thought about that. And there's this fear of, if I settle or I relax, I'm going to lose my edge and I won't be able to perform at that level that I need to. But I do think that's a really important question, and I think there's some unexpected benefits when we can find that true rest of recognizing I've done enough, and this jog in nature is plenty. I don't need to add a podcast or add some extra learning on top of that.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, there needs to be a balance, because your clients are high performance coaches, correct?
Yeah.
And you have to recognize that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of coaches around who are not high performance coaches, and we could argue are not pushed like those high performance coaches to more and more and more. Instead, they may have the view of, I don't need to do anything. So there's that balance with coaches of, no, there's some things you need to learn. There are some podcasts like this you need to listen to that are helpful. So don't put me out of a job, Benjamin. But
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
I do take your point very much so, in the sense that we those of us who are very intrinsically motivated to pursue excellence tend to sometimes pursue it at the cost of the health of ourselves or the other people around us.
Mhm.
I want to be thoughtful of your time and just the listeners and watchers as well. If you could maybe provide some advice for coaches based on your experiences of who you've worked with and your own education, 2 or 3 things that you would recommend coaches do, listen, think about, what would you encourage them to walk away with from this?
I think start with the question of, why do you coach, and what leads you into that space at whatever level, at whatever experience that you have. Thinking about what leads you into coaching, and you might have conversations with a loved one or a colleague who can kind of ask follow-up questions to just continue that train of why. But you might also do that as a journaling practice and just write at the top, like, why do you coach, and start jotting down what comes to mind immediately, and then just follow up with why, and just keep asking why until you get to those deeper values. Maybe it was a coach who really inspired you. Maybe it's the ability to stay around sports, stay active. Maybe it's some other core value that emerges. And I think that's really important, because you can build everything else from that foundation. But when we get into coaching without knowing why we're doing it, or from some motivations of that maybe aren't truest to our most authentic version of ourselves, then some of the outcomes and expectations on our players, on our coaching staffs, can be distorted, and we can lose track of the deeper meaning and purpose that really drives motivation, and I think long-term success.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think those of us who have been coaching and have maybe coached for a number of years, it's easy to fall into the trap of where we are right now and what we have to do next season or the end of this season. We forget our why. And our why may have started many years before because we loved kids or we loved being involved in sports. And it's almost been transformed into a business or I don't know what else I would do, so I keep doing this. I spoke to a professional basketball coach recently who told me 4 times a year I think about quitting. But in that respect, they're stuck in a rut because if they quit, what will they do? What qualifications do they have? What training do they have to allow them to do something other than coach basketball? And I think we have to remember that too, in the sense of, why did I really start this? And am I still doing it because of that? Or have I got caught in some trap? And I'm excited. There's some research hopefully coming out soon in a journal or two in relation to stress and burnout and some of the variables in that coaches have experienced that we've done some studies on. Benjamin, thank you so much for joining me. If somebody wants to reach out to you, wants to learn more about your business and kind of maybe working with you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Sure. They can find me at innerlifeofsport.com. And there's a link there for a performance conversation. And really that's just a space for me to hear what challenges are you trying to navigate, and see if we can provide some clarity on kind of that inner experience of those challenges and some practical tools in about an hour conversation. And that's totally free. That's just a way of me being able to partner and kind of collaborate, learn more about where you might be, and see how I can best be of support, and really wanting to help people take away a tangible and practical outcome as they live those conversations.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining me. And just a reminder, everybody, that we try and do these once every few weeks. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you're watching. But on behalf of myself, Tim Baghurst, and Benjamin Smith, thanks so much for watching.